there's kind of constantly, and it's sort of constantly shifting. And, there's always like some good friends. And I like the vibe of New York. I mean, you get the itch every once in a while to move out into the woods or move to Los Angeles or move overseas. But I don't know, New York, it's just, I don't know, always kind of a little couple surprises here and there, which kind of keep you excited. And I like that.
Did you get the itch at all during the pandemic? It was rough. I'm in my one bedroom. It was rough being stuck in the one bedroom, knowing I'm living in like one of the great cities and not being able to actually go out and do anything.
I don't know. I embraced the change, I guess. I got like deep into like recording and, reading and doing some other weird video projects and stuff I never would have done otherwise. And then kind of started doing a bunch of other things and taking on other projects, like starting a record label and all this kind of stuff, which now that things are opening up, I'm like, what of all these projects I took on did I get myself into? Like, I'm still like finishing like maybe like 4 or 5 remixes for people and stuff. And like all those projects, you say, that sounds like a lot of fun once you can go outside and hang out with your friends and go to gatherings and stuff like that. You're like, oh yeah, that's right. I used to, turn some of these things down because I was like, you want to have some free time or something too.
You've always struck me as somebody who is, not necessarily super busy, then at least somebody who has a lot of irons and a lot of fires at once.
Yeah, I mean, I also just really love to work on things and, and do different things in different projects. So, I'm kind of a sucker for like someone who says like, would you want to go do this? And I'm like, yeah, of course. It just sounds, and that's, I guess, maybe one of those comes back to one of those things that I love about New York, where, there's always some like friend who's got some cool project that you can maybe help on, or do something. And, all of those people, since they're kind of getting involved in other cool projects and different things. You hear from a friend a year later and all of a sudden they're like, doing soundtrack work or something and are looking for someone to play slide guitar on. And you're like, oh, I've been practicing slide guitar, so maybe I can do this now, and stuff. So it's kind of cool.
That's one of those examples that sounds like a very specific and therefore real example.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You played slide guitar on a soundtrack?
No, it wasn't a soundtrack. It was just on a recording that someone was going to use for, I'm not even sure exactly what they ended up using it for. They were looking for like, crazy, eerie ambient sounds. And I was like, I can produce that. And who knows, maybe it'll end up in a soundtrack or a movie or something like that.
It's definitely a direction a lot of musicians I've spoken with have gone in. It's been this interesting thing, to see, as some indie bands have like found it difficult to continue subsisting solely on being in a band. A lot of people have moved in the soundtrack direction, and given the kind of music that you make, it seems like it could be a pretty good fit for you.
Yeah, I even did I got a job just briefly in the pandemic. Someone had asked me if I could do this music for like a Samsung phone commercial, and it was they had like an idea of like some really insane track that really exactly fit with what was going on. But what they needed is like something to go along with the animation to make it all sort of make sense and really speak to the people who are going to be watching this phone advert. And I then all of a sudden realized like I could do this so easily. Like, I'd record, me throwing a hammer at a pan all day. So it's like to make these sounds of, like, oh, I can make something that sounds like rain, hitting on a tin roof, and like all of these things that you don't realize you would be good at, like synthesizing these like cool accents and sounds that sound unique and are recorded to be something special, but yet just to kind of capture an energy. I've been, I don't know, doing this stuff where I know all of that kind of stuff, or even like, I don't know, you just kind of learn that from mastering people's records and, and all of these things, to like how you could produce something professionally for someone, where, I'm so often not working in that world and not kind of excited about, what someone someone like that would be looking for, but yet you realize eventually like, oh, I'm I don't know, an expert at that kind of stuff, even though it's like something that a field that I would have never tried to go involve myself in.
That's wild, because that's not even like soundtracking. That's like Foley work almost. That's like going
Totally.
into creating sound effects.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's kind of even like, I don't know, like I'm not like such a skilled musician in that sense of where like, I understand, all of the scales or how every single type of music that's ever been made kind of fits together, but kind of more just sort of like transforming sound into feeling and stuff. So it's like Foley work is exactly even kind of what a lot of my whole songs are based on or something, really. It's like, you get some crazy saw or something, and that's the sound which inspires you to create some song. And then you want the feeling of, something anxious or someone like running after you or something. And you just kind of figure out a way to simulate that while, I don't know, hanging out in your space.
For a lot of these songs, is that kind of the skeletal structure that you're building it on top of is a specific sound or feeling?
Those kind of things just sort of organically come together. So it's sometimes it's a little bit of a basis of that, and then it's where you kind of want something else out of it. And so you kind of sort of just try whatever you possibly can to kind of create those kinds of things. And then I even notice a lot in like the lyrical content or everything. It's sort of almost every song that I write is a little bit of like a big giant ball of every song I've ever written, where you're sort of, or like every experience you've ever had in your life in some ways. It's like the feeling of like being disappointed or angry or in love or whatever that is. And then there's like an element of that which is sort of like the conflict of any of these kind of compositions. It's like that sort of balance of, I don't know, feeling good and bad and everything, and what those extreme feelings can kind of make you sort of want to cry or make you feel good inside.
How much of it though just starts from a place of not only just experimenting but just kind of fucking around with, obviously you're a pedal guy, obviously you're an effects guy, you've got all these guitars. How often is the starting place really just you sitting and screwing around on a guitar or other instrument?
So often, I mean, it's so often, it's like, I don't know, I'll try to do this thing where I'll like just try to be like really proactive and write as much material as I possibly can. I used to kind of wait for some sort of moment of inspiration, and I've just sort of like given up on that or something. It's like, sometimes those things do happen, but I'm also like a math guy, I guess. And so I feel like, if you're like constantly creating and being proactive, then eventually, it's just, you'll stumble upon something really great sometimes. And so, I'll just kind of constantly be working and kind of trying to create things. And so, a lot of times you'll be doing one thing and then you get inspired to do something else. And so you really just have to be open to changing directions on what you're working on.
Are you a math guy? Like I feel like a lot of people like will sometimes say like I'm a math guy, but it's more abstract.
I don't know. I don't know. What does a math guy entail? Like,
Does math play a role in the work that you do?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, both my parents were math teachers. And so that probably has something to do with it. But I mean, math plays a role in everything you do every day. All, anyways, whether you're kind of aware of that, it maybe is another story. But I think it does and it doesn't. I mean, I like things which don't play a role in math, and that's kind of like exciting, and why I kind of love music and, abstract art and a lot of things is those things where, you can't find out what the math is, or you don't really quite, understand what that is. But, working with music and sound waves and stuff, there's definitely like math involved. And if you understand how a lot of that stuff, works and plays with the material you're kind of creating, then that can sometimes help things out, or it can also hinder you too. Like, you'll probably make decisions based on things which, aren't some perfect grid, because that's sort of exciting and you want there to be like life involved in it. Maybe it would have been better if it was, there's always those kind of constant decisions, and, those kind of things where you have to sort of decide what you're going to do with what you're kind of creating. But, I don't know. I think math is interesting, and I like, kind of like interesting problems which work out, and, finding things which, are like harmonious to other things.
What did your parents, the math teachers, think about you entering into this life?
They're always like really supportive, but I always, just kind of thought maybe I was like a failure or something because I don't know, it's like they're so like wholesome and sweet, and like do so many things to kind of like be involved in their community and everything that's sort of going on, and being teachers, like being a musician, and kind of in a failed musician for so many years, and doing these things like tinkering on projects, which are like, it's almost in a way like you're just staying up really late at night, and working on something for yourself to create this instrument that you want to play. It's like eventually these things, work into the world where you can start to share them with other people, and other people will be inspired by the music you make and all of these things. And so it starts to make sense later in my life. But at one point, I just thought maybe I'm just doing all of these things kind of for myself. And, this isn't really like, help anybody out, like being in a failed band. It's like, maybe this isn't what you should be doing with your life, so.
As though if you had gone away at the time, there wouldn't be like 50
Yeah,
other
exactly.
bands.
Yeah, for sure. So,
How long of a period would you classify that time in your life of being a failed musician?
I don't know. Maybe from, I guess, maybe it wasn't the longest amount of time. Maybe from like 2000 to 2007 or something.
It feels like forever, obviously, when you're
It
in it.
does feel like forever. And yeah, especially in those kind of years when you could be doing something else and stuff, and you're kind of like taking some other jobs that are maybe more legitimate jobs, but just as like a side job because you really want to be doing something else, But um, I don't know.
What was the turning point?
I think when the band kind of took off, that sort of seemed to kind of make a difference. And at those, it was kind of like growing organically, and it even grew organically from then. And then also, same with the pedal company, has always kind of grown organically. But when you're like doing all of those things, you're doing every aspect of it, it doesn't really seem like it's growing. You don't even realize sometimes that, like, oh, this is becoming more and more serious. Like, people always ask me like, oh, what, people have used the pedals and that kind of stuff. And was your mind totally blown when that happened? And, or did you open up for some band or something? And like, I don't know, kind of, it wasn't, it's like when looking back on it in retrospect or something, it's like really mind blowing. Or, imagining like a young Oliver driving around listening to Nine Inch Nails and then getting to open up for Nine Inch Nails is like, a crazy experience that I've had in my life. But the amount of work that we would put into these things, and trying to get tours and building up these shows and all of this stuff, it's, sometimes it's not as crazy, it's not as unbelievable when you're actually there doing it. Like, I remember when I lived in Virginia, some people be saying that, like, oh my gosh, you guys played CBGBs. Like, I could kill myself now or whatever. That's just the most.
It's just the dump of the earth.
Yeah, and it's like, well, if you were there, it wasn't that impressive, so.
I mean, it's one of those things. It's something that I've been trying to be better at in my own life, and I mean, hopefully, the past year has served to some degree as some kind of a reset. Given that we haven't been able to experience much as we're doing right now, talking to other people in the computer, but of just trying to going forward, be more mindful of those moments and be sort of more appreciative of them as they come by.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like, it's pretty wild. Like, I don't know, just kind of when you sort of like go through a montage of all those moments in your head of like all those kind of crazy experiences that you've had. Sometimes if you're ever like down that you're not doing anything, you gotta be thankful for all the stuff that has happened in your life and stuff. And yeah, that's cool.
Did the success of the band and the success of the company, did they happen at around the same time?
I mean, I don't know. The only thing I really ever noticed was there definitely was like a jump in the success of the band at one time. That was like, we got some, like, maybe it was best new music on Pitchfork. And then it was just like instantly, there was people who were like, we want to book your band. No, we want to book your band.
You hear about that abstractly, but it's crazy to to hear that. I don't know. Kingmakers is always, it's kind of like an overblown term, but like just that coverage at that moment, the right coverage at the right time can completely, from one site, can completely break things open.
So true. Yeah, it's completely nuts, And like, we were working on a lot of other things that were like, really monumental in my life already besides that. Like we had the space, the Death by Audio space. We were like building it up. We were having bands play there and do stuff. So it was like totally even separate. And, now when people are always like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, that was your house and all of this stuff. And like, and even the time when some of those shows and all of these things are going on, like, you don't even realize how incredible it is. You're like, oh yeah, it's so cool. We're hanging out with Dan Deacon or whatever. And like, this show is incredible, but you're like, I don't know, sometimes, you don't realize, I guess, that stuff's going to kind of like ever end or whatever is going to happen. And you don't know that like there's not going to be underground shows as much in New York and all of that and stuff. And yeah, but, definitely when that Pitchfork review kind of came out, that was really crazy. And it's weird that there was that power, being now like as a record label owner and seeing the other side of these things. Like we've just been doing a lot of stuff with these bands and all of this since like Instagram and everything is blown up. I feel like there's this huge pay to play thing that's going on now that I just never realized, where everyone's trying to monetize every ad, everything that's going on. It's like, I don't know. It just seems like things have turned into like this weird sort of scummy place where I don't know, maybe they were like that in the past too, and that's how some of these bands got big, just by some record label dumping millions of dollars at them. But I don't know.
There's a long history of playola and plugola in radio, right, dating back to what, like the 50s, if not before that. Just speaking as somebody who writes for a living, I think it's just so hard to run a successful site now that everybody is kind of, I mean, it sucks, but it's like, if you're going to make a living as a publication and a writer, like there's a certain, perhaps kind of, if not nefarious, I mean, certainly like sponsored content and stuff that you would have turned your nose up at, 10 years ago. I mean, like at the top of the conversation, you were saying like, oh, I did this thing for Samsung, and like, and I don't think you probably didn't even think twice about it, right? And
Yeah, no, for sure.
when you were like a 15-year-old punk or whatever, you probably
Yeah.
would have been like, oh man, no, I'm not going to write a song for Samsung.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, who knows though, I guess on some of those things, but yeah, I even noticed that stuff now too. It's like, I'm looking at like friends, like, Instagrams or something, and they've got some sort of thing where it's like, you know, uh, the music industry is getting destroyed, fuck you, Spotify. And I'm thinking to myself, oh crap, we're like, doing like, I don't know, little like videos for Spotify for like the artists on our label to try to like help them get more Spotify plays. It's just kind of a little bit weird. It's like, there's definitely, there's not like a clear cut picture of like even, what's good and wholesome, or what are people fighting for, or what's, I don't know any of this stuff even anymore. And I think that even these, you can even tell there's like these people who are like younger users or other people who are not so like tech savvy. It's easy to use Spotify. I get it why people are doing that kind of stuff. And then as the hardcore people who are sitting there like silk screening the covers to their record jackets, and they're like, we're not making as much money because everyone's taking all the digital money and stuff. You hear that argument too. So I don't know. It's kind of crazy.
Obviously, well, prior to launching a label in the past year, you've had this pedal company for a while now. Do you think just the nature of running a business has changed your perspective on the industry?
Um, yeah, I mean, it has, but we've been like really lucky, or I've been really lucky. Like we've always kind of done everything the way that we always wanted to. It's like we almost, and for, I don't even know if we have even yet to this day, but we would always have like a no advertising policy and stuff where we wouldn't do any of that stuff. And, if we failed at something, it's like, we would just be like, oh, well, I guess we failed at that. And, that's a bummer. Just try to be a good company and just try to do those good things. But that's, we've been lucky where people are interested in the products that we make. So, it would have been different, I think, if we had more sort of struggles with this kind of stuff. And not to say that there wasn't like tons of struggles making these things happen and we didn't make tons of mistakes, but it's like, yeah, I don't know. I think that I've always tried to be a little bit anti-business, but you know what? Sometimes that's like slapped me in the face or whatever, where it's like, we like misfiled. I can't remember, like workers' comp or something like that. And we got like a bill for like $30,000 or something. So we like, yeah, had to pay some bill of, whatever for workers' comp and all this stuff. And sometimes, you do those kinds of things, and we've been lucky. I know people have different nightmare situations. I mean, I've had some nightmare situations with all of this stuff too, where like, someone was stealing money and who was a partner in the company, and so it's like, having to deal with that. And like, you think that you're working with your good friends, and then people are kind of like backstabbing you or something. And it's just sort of weird things that you would think, being like a wholesome DIY company and trying to do all of these good things, that it would, everyone would be cool. But there's reasons why people do things, in a proper way or something, and have contracts to deal with things and stuff. It's like some of those things, I always just kind of like had this, I would always tell kids, at shows like, oh man, you want to start a company, like, or whatever, a show space, just find your friends, get together, start it up. It's going to be great. But like the other side of it is like, chances are one of your friends is going to be a douchebag that you don't realize. And like, you'll find that out along the way, but you don't want to tell someone that, because then like maybe they won't like dive in and start some crazy stupid company or something. So I don't know. It's like there's like advantages and disadvantages to all that. I mean, same thing with, I know like people booking places, sometimes even like, there was sort of this DIY mentality about like people who are booking shows, and they don't really want to work with managers or something, because they're like, oh, this band can't take care of themselves or something. But then, being one of those bands who would book tours and do all of the booking yourself, it's like I got ripped off so many times at shows, and you'd realize that like the guy who was really cool booking your band was stealing from the door and stuff. And so it's like, I don't know. You know what I mean? You can see it does kind of, some of these proper routes and these proper ways to do things sort of like suck the fun out of it. But it's also, I guess, a lot of people get burned doing stuff. So kind of makes sense, maybe.
You said before, like, you wouldn't think that somebody would want to rip you off if you were like this, just sort of like DIY outfit, but at the same time it's easier to rip you off, right? At the same time, you know what I mean? Like, there are always predators around, and there are always people looking to make a quick buck. If you do seem to be this kind of easygoing outfit, then you're in a way opening yourself up to it.
Kind of, yeah. Which, I don't know. It just kind of, I don't know. For some reason, I always just give people the benefit of the doubt and can't imagine why anyone would want to take advantage of somebody else. But that's pretty naive. So
It's one thing when you're the only person who's depending on it, but the math changes when you've got employees, when you've got people whose livelihoods are dependent on it.
yeah, that's totally true. And as like the pedal company and everything grows bigger and bigger, it's like, the decisions that you make are a little bit more stressful and things like that, and can really have like an impact, and those, like, I don't know, having a business like the income of everything like swings so far in all sorts of different directions that you kind of have to make some tough decisions, figure out how to, I don't know, you got to like grow up, be a boss at times.
Is there a parallel between that and being essentially the leader of a band?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, that has, it's like, with all of those things, I think the way to kind of make it and sort of be successful is to, overwork yourself if you can, and, not expect anything in return for it. Like, I think that's the one of those things that you always, like, if you want to be successful doing something, it's going to take a lot of work, and you're not going to get the rewards that you think you deserve for it. And you're just going to kind of have to be sort of cool with that all the times. And I think that that's one of those hard things that, working with other people in a band, where some of those people are like expecting more from all of their efforts and everything that they put in. And so, but you do what you can.
You've been the constant member of the band. The new EP is out, and it's you and two relatively new people to the group. You called yourself an easygoing guy, and you seem like a very affable and nice person. Why has the band been through so many members?
I mean, all sorts of different reasons. It's like, sometimes people, can't really sort of like keep up and do what it is that you're sort of trying to do. That's one of the reasons. Other people, it's like they just, have other things going on in their life and want to go on and do those other things. And, I always think in whatever it is that I'm doing, you always want the people that you're working with to be doing whatever it is they want to do. So if, they want to go off and be an actor or move to California or whatever it is they want to do or start a family or something, like, that's makes sense. I mean, being a musician is like a lot of hard work and takes a lot of dedication, at least in the stuff that I want to do. And so if people aren't willing to kind of do that, then, you have to have those conversations with the people, and sometimes their idea of what they want to do changes. There's all sorts of different things. I mean, it's also sometimes people think they deserve more for what they're doing, and it's like, if there's nothing to go around, I don't know what to say. It's like, it's not as such a glorious life as everyone thinks to be doing that. And, often you get like, either no money or barely any money or have to pay money or something like that to make things happen. So that's just the way it is.
I think of those stories when a couple gets divorced and one of the spouses has to pay so much more alimony than they're capable of paying, because there was a point in their life when they were super successful, when they were making a certain amount of income, and that's where the bar is sort of set. And is that your sense of people's perspective about the band's success, that it's sort of based on whatever that highest point was?
Yeah, and I think it's like, there's like people just get like a skewed idea of what happens with all that money. It's like someone, once you kind of like I always want to run the band sort of as like a family, where sort of like everyone's sort of working together to kind of create music, and, what are the decisions of what we want to do and all of this stuff. I just think it's like really exciting and fun to be doing things with other people, we get everyone sort of excited about it, like creatively and everything. But then when people realize, which, I mean, whatever, I'm always open about anything, they see that you get paid, $10,000 for some show or something, and then everyone gets $200. You're like, why did we not get so much more money? And it's because, whatever, you had to fly there and you had to, do this and that, and you bought all this merchandise for the next tour and all, or whatever it is, just like all these things kind of like sort of have to be worked out. And I think sometimes people sort of inherently think that like that things should have been done some different way, even though everything's like all decided. It's like, and you could be like, well, you're the one who wanted to stay in a fancy hotel room or something like that, or you're the one who wanted to stay an extra 3 days or whatever. It's like, it's just not like sort of like helpful. And it's also, people just kind of have unrealistic expectations of, what sometimes some of that stuff looks like or costs or something.
Do you become the kind of de facto business guy when it comes to having to make all of those hard decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the type of person where it's like I'll end up spending a bunch of my own money to sort of just make these things happen and just smooth it over and just not have to worry about it. It's like, but it's also like, I just know that like things go wrong. You know what I mean? In those scenarios, it's like, there was like excess baggage or something, or you missed your flight. And so you got to pay extra money. And these things just kind of happen. It's like you kind of, it's going to always happen with every project that you do and everything. It's just kind of, things that you can use as sort of like a learning tool to try to like pay attention to those aspects better. But, you're always going to mess things up, and you really just drive yourself crazy. You're always going to have people that, write bad reviews about you and everything. You're always going to like do things the wrong way. I think it's easy to get like super discouraged about a lot of these things. And some people can't really deal with that very easy. I think, you have to be prepared to just shrug off a lot of bad things all the time. And I think you even learn that living in New York. It's like, it's just nonstop bad things happen where, I don't know, you lost your wallet, and then, whatever. And then, you can't get into that bar you were walking to. And then the tire on your bike goes flat and all of that kind of stuff.
I was thinking about that a little bit when we were talking about being mindful, and you were talking specifically about the venue, and not that you didn't appreciate it, but that perhaps you didn't appreciate in the way you would have liked to in hindsight. And I think what takes us out of the moment are those small dumb things. You're living in this magical place of Dan Deacon's playing the show, but maybe maybe there's like construction happening that day, or maybe like the landlord was going to turn the power off or something. And those are the things. It's just those small, annoying things that happen every day that really take away your ability to appreciate the stuff as it's happening.
Yeah, but maybe that stuff also helps distract you so you're not like in some ways aware of how crazy the situation that you're involved in is or something. And it's kind of cool that like there are just those weird things sort of going on all over the place, and you're kind of mixed in with all of that stuff, and it becomes kind of normal.
You had said earlier that the maybe kind of the ability to do a DIY space or DIY projects doesn't necessarily exist in New York now. I mean, do you get the sense that the venue in some form could exist today?
I think it could, and I hope that there's like people who are having like plans to make this happen, but and maybe it's just because of the pandemic and what had happened. Like nobody's trying to like start this up and make this happen. But there's even because everything changes so much in New York and like really quickly, like the landscape and everything changes. Like all of those places that were like kind of crummy, or a lot of them are all now so fancy. It's like some fancy park by the water and all this stuff. It just seems like, I don't even know, if that, there's even the clientele to like kind of go to some of these places and stuff, and seeing all these places for rent in my neighborhood that are just like crazy expensive. It's like, is that even going to be the place where you're going to get is enough idiots to show up who are like doing things that are just so moronically stupid that makes it like fun and exciting? I don't know, but I'm sure it is. It's going to start to kind of get back to those kind of things going, and hopefully people start up these spaces. Like, I don't know, that's one of the most exciting things I think about New York, is where the feeling that there's like no rules, and the feeling that, oh wow, this, rooftop is an art show or something like. And I think that that stuff is probably going to just about to happen and start happening again. You just kind of have to get involved in it.
The first time you go to a venue and you're not sure if you're in the right place, you're not sure if this is like the right dark alley that you're supposed to be walking down, is just like an absolutely magical experience.
It really is. Yeah, for sure. You're like you're kind of exploring this space too, and it's definitely when it's like some weird loft someplace, when you're climbing up a fire escape or something, like, you don't even know what's going to happen. Like when it is like some curated Bowery Presents place, like, like they're probably, there's padding up on all the sharp edges or whatever. You're going to be safe, whatever. It's like you're kind of paying for, I don't know, all of that stuff to be sort of taken care of. But, I don't know, just like some loft party where someone like opens up a fire extinguisher and shoots it off. Like it's just exciting. It's like terrible in some moments in those events, but it's also like just such a thrill to just have that like unknown and unpredictable night be, what your destination is. And I think that that's like, I don't know, really thrilling and exciting. And, that's, I don't know, the fun of life.
That's a hard line to walk, though. We were talking about before about like why some of these things are put in place, and in terms of pedal company, why like certain workers comp or whatever, like why those exist. But like there's also the question of safety in a venue. It's like you want stupid, fucked up, silly things to happen, but like there's some legitimate real horror stories there. When it comes to like public safety, like that is not something that you want to, those aren't lines that you want to blur.
I mean, and yeah, that's totally true. And I mean, like I always thought, and that's one of those things where you don't know who you're dealing with. And like we would always, at like Death by Audio, treat all of those things very seriously. To try to make sure that like we were doing things as safe as we possibly could as people. I don't know if other people were doing that stuff. You still want artists to feel free to do whatever they want to do, but sometimes someone would just like walk in with like, chain fire dancing or something. And it's like, could something go awry? And, something terrible happens, sure. So you kind of have to like, I don't know, try to be as safe and as careful as you can, and just tell your buddy like, let's get the water ready in case we need some buckets of water or something to stop this. But we're not firemen who are running this thing, and it's not like there's I don't know, some of that stuff is up to code, but I don't know. Yeah, it's a tough situation.
Yeah, you can be fun and spontaneous and also have clearly marked fire exits, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly.
Those two things are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, for sure. But like I used to live in Providence, Rhode Island, and like they would rent out like really big, should have been abandoned warehouse spaces to people for nothing. And kids would just like live in it, and it would be like a fancy squat kind of thing. And tons of dangerous stuff. And then there was abandoned buildings that, we would go play in and hang out in. And, people would throw a party down on some like in some abandoned train tunnel that was like, yeah, someone could have hurt themselves seriously, or something. But it's also was like, that was exciting as hell.
A difference between like being a bunch of kids throwing a show at an abandoned train tunnel and like operating a venue, even if it is a DIY one.
Yeah, for sure.
So it sounds like the label was kind of scratching an itch during the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit just because we are kind of trying to decide whether we wanted to release the A Place to Bury Strangers stuff ourselves or work with another label again, and uh, and so it was kind of like it was just a decision where it was like, I guess let's just kind of do this ourselves, and that was like, yeah, just to try it out, to see all of this hard work that we've put in over the years, and like you definitely get a lot out of working with other labels, but it seemed to kind of make sense to start our own label and do that stuff. And I had a friend that I was talking with for a while, this guy Mitch O'Sullivan from Berlin, who actually now he lives in New Zealand, but he was really keen on the idea, and he's always been in like all these really cool bands and worked on some labels and stuff. And so and then we got my manager Steven Matrix to also work with us and sort of kind of work out a lot of the logistics of things, and the three of us just decided to start a label.
How has the experience been so far?
Doing great. I didn't know that it was that we were going to kind of get so much support really right away, and so many people were going to be so excited to be on the label. Actually, so it does definitely like add more time and work that you have to do, and I'm on a lot of like Zoom calls and kind of like touching up artwork or mastering audio and stuff that I would have done sort of already for friends. Like you then have like I guess a lot more friends that you're kind of doing these things for. But it's been really cool. Like I've kind of found out about a lot of cool new music, and seen like a lot of support from all the other people that we're working with. And yeah, I'm also happy to be able to like maybe help out some of these bands and stuff and do things who are just kind of starting out and guide them in a good direction, and know that I'm like wholesomely just trying to support their music and not make money off of them and stuff. So
I feel like we're hitting on a fascinating part of your personality, which is like you could have started a record label with the express purpose of releasing this EP or releasing your own music, but it sounds like you went like 0 to 60 and all of a sudden you're this like real record label in the sense
yeah.
of you're just suddenly like have a bunch of bands on your roster.
Yeah, it's been, and it's I mean that was also like help with, we got distribution like right away from Red Eye, who were like there were some friends of ours who worked there and were always interested in distributing A Place to Bury Strangers, and and then they just kind of like really embraced everything that we were doing with this label, and that just kind of helps deal with a lot of those things that I never really wanted to do as a DIY label in the past, where you're trying to work to get it into record stores and stuff like that. Like I love people who work at record stores and I love talking to them, but the like logistics of mailing out individual records to hundreds of places and stuff is just not the exciting part.
We talked about this a little bit at the top, but now that things are opening up and now that like you will want to live your life outside of Zoom, probably tour on the music and do other things. What's kind of the contingency plan? Like how are you readying all of these different jobs and different irons that you have in the fire how are you readying all of those roles for this return to kind of real life again?
I mean, you just always are kind of like working on some of those things. Like, during the pandemic, I like designed a ton of pedals. I recorded like, I don't know, 100 songs or something like that. I, did all sorts of those different things. We've been still even kind of like making videos and getting things ready for stuff that we can do as a label. And, since that kind of started, you kind of, you start these projects, and then, there's all sorts of things that have even happened where which you wouldn't really expect, but, or maybe you would, but the pandemic like made it really hard to like get custom parts manufactured for these like pedals and effects. And then it's also like increased vinyl, manufacturing times by a long, I've always just kind of been this sort of thing where, or in this way where you shouldn't really expect anything, out of anything. And so, if this record isn't, if the timeline gets messed up and things kind of have to change, like that's just the way things go a lot of times. And, you just kind of can scramble only to do what you can do with all of this stuff. So, if the pandemic comes back and there's no travel anywhere, and, nobody can ever come out with a record because all the vinyl disappears from Earth, or whatever it is, or the internet gets shut down and nobody can talk to each other anymore, like there's tons of other fun things to do. So I don't know, you can just try to do one of those things. And I think, having so many irons and so many different fires, like, that's just my whole life is kind of a contingency plan in a way. It's like, if, the label fails, there's the pedal company. If the pedal company fails, there's, making music. If music were to fail, there's, any one of those other things. And I don't know. I love doing whatever it is that I'm doing, really. So there's, you can have fun doing anything if you want. Well, maybe not, but you know what I'm saying.
In that sort of like 7 year window, I think you had said earlier, where you were kind of, well, not failed yet, but sort of like a struggling musician at that point. Did you ever come close to kind of packing it in and just, I guess just getting a day job, or just like sort of, I don't know, giving up on the dream?
I don't know if I ever would have. I was trying desperately not to have a day job, but that was something I learned a while ago, I think, where it's just, you may as well be doing something kind of, for yourself and creating something. But I had given up like already, the whole time that this band had existed, I'd already kind of given up on the sort of a little bit of this DIY aesthetic and attitude towards the band, because I had this band before A Place to Bury Strangers, and like we really went so hard on, trying to like silk screen all these posters and put up all these things, and we'd silk screen album covers, and, make all of our own merchandise and book all of our own tours. And, we tried so hard, but I was living in Virginia at the time, and we tried so hard to make this stuff happen, and it was just almost always impossible. And then, so when I moved to New York and started A Place to Bury Strangers, I was, we were just kind of making music for ourselves and stuff that we wanted to listen to. And I just always thought, well, if I ever like really give it a go, then I want it to be like with some legitimate record label that kind of like puts all the effort into it. And I'll just focus on making music. And then when that we got that Pitchfork review, it was based on this album that I didn't even want to come out, which was just it was just all of these demos that I'd recorded just to get everyone else who I was playing music with to like be excited about all these songs that I'd kind of written. And so, and then that just like completely convinced me again that it was like, oh, I guess I should just do things on my terms. And this was like this music that I was excited about, and it was exactly the sounds and everything that I wanted to create. And, it made a big splash. So it was sort of like, kind of justified all of that sort of, work and everything I'd sort of done, to kind of create exactly what I wanted to hear. And, uh, I don't know, kind of changed everything.
Do you feel like you were trying to be something else before that more kind of raw, untapped demo was the thing that connected with people?
I don't think I was trying to be something else ever. I just thought that it was like, I'd just sort of given up on the idea that there would be like an audience for this kind of stuff. I just sort of thought that, okay, I mean, I'm just making music for myself or some of my friends. And like, if you're going to go play a show, it's because it's going to be fun, not because, there's a chance to like for some big thing to happen or something like that. You sort of get those ideas when you go to, when you're booking your first tours and all of these things, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to Chicago, the big city. I wonder if, Steve Albini's going to be there or whatever. You have all these strange dreams of things that might possibly happen that are just kind of unrealistic.